Hey, Laura J., empowerment coach with an alternative approach, here to let you know that 5 years ago today, September 15th, I stood up for myself in a way I never had before. I was in a relationship where I was a fully kept housewife that had never been married, and yet I fully was in the shadow side of one of my survival archetypes in particular, which was the prostitute. The other four are the victim, child, and saboteur, of which were very active when in that relationship, too. Except the prostitute is the part of us when in the shadow that will sell ourselves out for the highest bidder. And then when we finally get sick of doing so and learn the lessons, we then are able to step into the sacred side of that archetype. And an archetype is simply a familiar pattern that we can recognize simply by saying the word. I say prostitute, you say, but what the truth is that all of us contain all four of those survival archetypes, and then each of us contain 8 archetypes unique to us too. And when we step into the sacred side of our archetypes, like when I stood up for myself and after what I called a 2-week universal bitch slap, where all the bad behaviors that were tolerated because I lived in England in a relationship I had moved there for, where I knew no one before I moved there except the man that I went there for, who then introduced me to those that he knew and kept his circle small because he was focused. And I am grateful because he started as my teacher too. And we met when I got certified as a coach, teacher, speaker with the John Maxwell team. And then he and I met, and that was the beginning of my life out of the comfort zone of the known of my tribe. I was stretched and I grew, and when I moved there, I had to fit into his life. I needed to make myself fit because my prostitute was very active and wanted the life and wanted the love, wanted the opportunity that I knew that relationship offered me, and I did love the man that I was with at that time. Except I loved him more than I loved myself, which was why my prostitute was in her shadow during that relationship. And after those 2 weeks where the kids and he had come to Canada to visit my family, and there were several behaviors which were just intolerable, I had got to the place finally where I decided I was not willing to trade my esteem for the sake of the relationship that I had grown my identity around. And for that reason, when we went out for his birthday meal this day 5 years ago, when I sat across from him, missing the tooth that we had started the process of getting an implant for, because this tooth, the lateral incisor beside my front tooth, never grew in. I'm congenitally missing it, just as my aunt and great-grandfather on my mom's side were too. And ultimately, we then had to grow into ourselves. That tooth, I say, rebirthed me. And then the book I started working on 3.5 years ago, too, did the same. I call it the book that rewrote me before I finished it. And all of this stems from that moment when I sat across the table from the man that I loved, who had power over me and exercised it wisely. Not necessarily even consciously, but certainly on a subconscious level, there were undertones of power and control that had become intolerable to the part of me that said, no more will I trade who I am for the sake of belonging to someone that needs to command me, not because he necessarily knew that was what he needed, but I had learned a lot about power dynamics, and I have learned a lot more about it still. And so when I petitioned for my respect, and to say either I will be respected or I will not be here, and that demand was met with an ultimatum that I accepted and began my retreat back to Canada to regroup and heal and recollect, with a missing tooth that made it so I had to face the shame that came with a missing part that I thought made me imperfect. And as a child, I said I would never want to have children of my own for fear that I would pass on a congenital defect that had been handed down to me, because my soul was the one that my lineage knew was able to transmute whatever was the original root cause of that missing piece. I say this because on this day, when I sat across from my caretaker, as the young, at that time, 27-year-old woman that I was, who had then been kept by him for 4 years, after having been kept by my family all the years until then, and even after too. This last year has been revolutionary because it truly saw me step into my own power out of necessity, because for the first time in my life, my choices led me further across the pond than what that geographical distance had. Because when I called myself into the police to say the system is corrupt and I don't know who to call because you are part of that, they looked at each other when they came to my grandparents' place after I had called on my way back from Toronto after a 3-week trip that had sent me over the edge and squarely out of my head and into my heart. And they looked at each other and gave a nod and a code and then said, "Okay, come with us." And I did, not understanding that I was about to go through the mental health system from a new vantage point. And the first psychiatrist that had seen me in Simcoe, where I stayed overnight thinking they would test me to help me understand the chemical imbalance that must have been taking place for me to be able to be so happy in a system when others just did not seem to have that same spark in their eye to what I did and do, because I had not become the broken bull as I had saw in Dallas when I went to the stockyards and was walking along the streets and seeing the bulls that stood by their masters waiting for visitors, tourists like us, the group I was with, having won an incentive trip with the company I was a salesperson with, an organic skincare company, which taught me a lot, not just about sales, but also what the plot has been to decay and erode the nutritional value of the very soil that we have access to, our food grows in. It is being depleted, and it is also being filled with pesticides and chemicals and metals that do not serve us, but certainly feed the system, which was what I experienced when I was then sentenced to the mental health system under First Day Form 1, that is a 3-day voluntary hold where you're meant to be able to speak to legal counsel, of which I was denied. The second place that I went to after the first, when the psychiatrist there had told me to look into Goff's work, who actually was the creator of holotropic breath therapy and how to actually reach heightened states naturally through your breath, because that is the language the soul speaks. And then when I went to the second place, I was rolled in and saw the paradigm, which I wasn't sure whether I had seen a movie of or whether it was deja vu of having been there before, and I do believe it was the latter. because I was interviewing to be a corrections officer at the time. And when I was rolled in there, I realized that the nurses and doctors who I refer to as the guards, since they didn't actually try to help the ones who were locked up there, except to give them food when required and water too, sometimes. Others were denied when they were seemingly going out of their minds and screaming and shouting, and then others who had compassion, like me, walked down and put my hand on the window of one who looked at me with terror in her eyes and put her hand up to mine with the glass in between, and I said some things to give her solace in her trauma, and she understood the truth of what I said, and if I'm honest, it was not the kindest of things, because I was very fearful of what would happen when I sensed the energetic pattern that we were living in that moment. But when they realized they could not break me, having closed my door to the cell after having chastised me to make me think that I was locked up to test me, which is what they do, I walked over and I opened that door, just to let them know that I knew I was not trapped, that I could see beyond their lies and tries to gain control over me. And at one point, one of the guards even exclaimed, "Fuck," simply because he knew that I was not willing to play their game. I was asking the questions that taught me the rules of how to work the system that I was in. They changed my name, had it wrong, not matching my address 3 times. And when I was before getting transferred to the 3rd institution that I ended up staying at for the remaining 2+ weeks after they Form 3'd me after the Form 1, where I was denied legal counsel, where they avoided eye contact with patients and told us not to talk or touch each other. But they didn't try to control that either, specifically. No one tried to touch me inappropriately, so there wasn't a problem I had to try to get help with. But when someone questions your sanity, how do you, the sane one, say, "I am sane," in a sick system? Germ theory tries to get the goldfish that is healthy in a sick tank sick in order to justify the sickness of the tank. That is what the system does, and we must understand we live in an abusive parental society, and while the relationship that marked the start of this message to you was not abusive from a physical perspective, there were mental and emotional and psychological components to that relationship that really unscrewed who I knew myself to be and plugged me into something else, which then when I left, I was no longer who I was, and I no longer was who I had become. And so then I had to spend the next several years figuring out who I was underneath of both of those identities that I had faithfully taken on, because I am a great student. Always have been. Didn't always get the greatest of marks, but certainly did my best, and thought and analyzed and did my best to ask the questions that needed to take place in order for me to get to the answer I thought that others wanted. Well, the answers that experience in the mental health system taught me were that the system do not want individuals to find answers, which is exactly why the big V that Gates Foundation is working to unroll are actually said to alter the RNA of the DNA, to turn off the free-thinking gene of individuals like me and you who have spent this long watching this message, because most do not have the attention span now, because we have been raised in an instant gratification culture that says if you did not get what you wanted or it was not entertaining by now, move, go. We live in a society with magpie syndrome. Magpie syndrome simply meaning that we get so distracted by the bright and shiny objects all around us that we don't actually stick with the one that could give us something of substance long enough to actually get full on it, and instead just we take little bite-sized pieces, except for the Netflix chill and culture. Netflix and chill culture that makes us think we need to just slow down and settle for the programming that is oftentimes trash, that, as Hulu actually says in their branding that I saw Alec Baldwin actually share with an alien tentacle coming out of his vest, that it is designed to make your brain mush so it is easier to suck out, because we are the batteries that are being used to feed the ones that control the system that controls us. We are the ones that have the power that we have freely given away. And when my inner prostitute was living in the shadow in that relationship, and many other relationships since too, in that state, I gave my power freely to anyone that I thought could wield it better than I was, more responsibly, because clearly I was not capable. I had convinced myself, the way that others had convinced me, in the society where I was raised and you were raised, to believe that the answers are outside of ourselves, and that teachers and parents and other institutions, governments, bosses, all of them know best, and certainly know better than us. And the ones who are willing to care so much to do the right job or to do the best, we just so freely give our power away, it hurts. We stop trusting ourselves and we lose sight of how our intuition speaks to us, forgetting that the tuition our soul paid ahead of time is the intuition that is here to guide us through our whole incarnation as us. And then we also have a larger team too, of angels, guides, ancestors, spirits who are around to counsel and guide if only we are willing to tune in. And then we also have the people in our lives that are there to help us and are tangible with a hue of the manatee that we all belong to and have forgot, and created safely separate boxes that make us think that this is who we are based on the BS that has created belief systems and paradigms of related ideas that then form together to make us think that this is who we are, our identity. This is a lot of information, and it is a deep dive into my reflections on this day and every day, because my greatest hope is to offer hope to others who may still be living in the shadow aspects of their/your/my divine nature. The shadow is simply where the light has not yet been exposed, and that is why fear likes to make love and light dissipate and cast it out for the sake of the false evidence appearing real, that makes us believe in a reality that is only realistic evidence appearing legit in tomorrow's yesterday, that reality really only is. It is very easy to get lost in someone else's vision, especially when they are looking after the inner child within us that wants to be looked after and supported and cared for, and CERB is a great example. Complete elimination of radical thinking is what CERB is all about. It completely eliminates radical thinkers. That's what certifications are all about. It makes us conform to a system, just as the government and mental health system would have us do. And what I learned is that the system is not designed to help the individual. The system is simply designed to make the individual conform to what the system believes is best for it. And it knows its system far better than we have been trained to know our own. What we must understand is that we have lived on planet Earth for humanity's whole existence to our knowledge. And there are more questions yet about her than what there are answers. And so how is it even fathomable that we would even think that the system would know more about a planet such as us, a star seed that has come here to be the change we seek in this world? How could they possibly know more about us than what they know about Earth? When they've studied her for so long, they have more questions yet, and they've never really studied us. Most of us have never been tested. Our chemical imbalances or balances, all of the ways that our machine, the body, works, haven't been tested. And yet we think that a system is going to know better how to help us than what we know ourselves. That when we go into a relationship with someone else that seems to have better answers and we want to give them our power, we trust them to wield it wisely, when the truth is most people are only in it for themselves, dialed into WIIFM, what's in it for me? That's the station most people are dialed into. And when we say, oh hey, let me play your station, that's when then we give them our power and we get more of that. And then we start to believe that maybe we are the ones that are sick, because we just don't see how we can fit into what we see to be a system that is not working. And yet, if it's not broken, don't fix it, they say. Well, F that, my friends. Let us become so fed up with being just fine that we recognize to be fine is to be fed up, insecure, negative, and emotional. That we don't want to talk about it when we're fine, and that's why we give the answer that everyone says, oh, leave that one alone. Okay, sure. Most people just don't care. But a lot of people still do, and we cannot lose sight of the fact that while there are many broken bulls in this world, the spirits of those who have been paid to stand on the streets and get $5 to be ridden for the sake of a picture that makes it look like the one on top is the hero, while the one underneath is truly the one with power but is forgot because they have been tamed and taught that they are not as powerful as what they actually are. We live in a society with broken bull spirits, and now it is our time to take that power back. Power is in the people. That is what the government most fears. And government, mind control. Control, govern, mental. If we actually start looking at words and start discerning them and actually feeling their resonance, that is when we find truth. We must breathe ourselves back into the present moment and understand that individual needs necessitate emotional resilience and resonance. We must understand the resonant field of what we are putting out, which is why understanding the power of the spoken word matters more than ever now. And we must also understand that resilience is about learning to maneuver the emotional high rise of awareness that we have been taught is not fun to play in. We just want to stay on top, and when we can't, then we think that we've failed. Well, failure is only not getting back up after we have fallen, because all of us do more than we don't oftentimes when we try something new. I taught myself how to do handstands over the 3.5 years that I have been practicing how to actually balance myself upside down. And it has been a lot of fun. And I have fallen far more, every time in fact, than I have managed to stay up. Because anytime we try something new and then have to go back to what we normally do, we then fall. And when we get disheartened because of that failure, we fail to see how much we've grown unless we do. And when we do, that is when we find the tipping point, like handstands taught me, where instead of falling down where I used to, I was able to stay up for a little longer. And it was a magical experience, because then the next time, not maybe right after, but eventually, I stayed up longer and longer, and now I can stay up for longer than ever before, because I've stuck with it. And even when I fell, I got back up and did it again. And that is what I hope you will too. This message on this particular day is to say that you may still be in the shadow side of the archetype that used to define you. Those four, the prostitute, victim, saboteur, and child, see us either in the shadow or the sacred aspects of ourselves at all times, any times, and usually those four travel together, shine light on one and the others follow. And so anytime you feel like you have found your shadow aspect up front and center with those four survival archetypes, know they are only trying to keep you safe, keep you alive. But the thing about comfort, as T. Harv Eker shares, is that if you aim to be comfortable, you'll never be rich. But if you aim to be rich, you can be very, very comfortable. And rich, by his definition, is in a monetary sense, probably mostly, and that's where most people fixate. But the truth is that true wealth is health. True wealth is self-knowledge. And it is about realizing that the self, the CELL-F, is filled in just the same as these archetypes are, with either faith or fear. And we get to choose what we will fill our own self with. And I hope that you will choose faith. I hope that you will choose to say, I surrender. I have no idea what to expect, but I know that I am as strong as anything that comes at me, and I also know that I cannot go it alone. All of us have to maneuver the valley of transformation alone. It is the hero's journey, and it is how we enter into the innermost cave of our hidden treasure. No one else can come there with us. That is where the dragon within us sleeps. The dragon is the one who keeps our dreams safely separate from the reality we are only able to bring into view if we are willing to sit with the part of us that is most uncomfortable until we are able to integrate it too, so that it can become an ally instead of an enemy. Because when we are fighting within our own selves, we have no capacity to win the battle that is outside. And when I was in Arizona, right before I came home and called myself in for the experience that changed my life, that I already shared in entering the mental health system, I was at the Hilton Embassy Suites, where I saw the evil that is in plain view. And while I was there too, I met Raphael, who gave me this bracelet, because he said, I think you need this more than I do. And it is reflective of the old Cherokee parable of the fight inside, where the grandfather is speaking to his son, and he says, you know, that there's a fight happening inside of me. One is a good wolf and one is a bad wolf. One is evil and one is love. And he spoke into all the aspects of each. And then when the grandson, horrified, said, which wolf will win, grandfather? The grandfather said, the one I feed. And the same is true for you. We are in a culture, the cult you are, of fear currently. That is the nature of the propaganda that is being sold to us, that we are told is reality, and we are being conditioned to say this is the new norm, to not speak, to say, okay, whatever you say. But no, if we do that, the children who have come here through us, currently and to be, should we not stop our ability to reproduce, which is very possible if we allow the system to continue poisoning us with your drug of choice. Pharmaceuticals are not good for us, and we all know it. But there are far too many vested interests in the very media mechanisms and platforms that we use commonly in order to connect, that then we say, well, hey, how do we actually communicate truth when there is so much censorship? And I say, we do the best we can and we unite offline. We decide we will get together and we find a unified front to be able to come together where leaders of this new world that we have a chance to create together can come together and say, okay, this is what I have to contribute for the sake of all and myself. And we must become more selfless without it needing to be completely unselfish. Because if we are not about the self, then we do not look after the self enough to eliminate fear within, which means it cannot be eradicated without. We must be willing to do the inner work in order for our outer circumstances to change, and we cannot do it alone. Mentorship matters. We need leaders, strong leaders, who are willing to do the inner work and have been doing the inner work. We who have been marinating in the horror show of our inner world are the ones that have now the opportunity to step up, to rise to the top and say, I have been through what I have been through and I have survived 100% of my darkest days in order to be here, to stand with you, side by side, shoulder to shoulder, so that we become the ripple effect that changes the world. But we can only do it together. We either be the pebble that gets thrown in like the witches of the days gone past, who were cast out and their backs turned by the ones who said, you're too different, you don't fit, you make me uncomfortable, I don't like it, I don't like you, goodbye, I will not help you. That has happened throughout centuries. And there are many of us who have had that happen in previous lifetimes, and that makes us afraid to actually take a stand now. And then I say to all of you who may be in that boat, I too have been there, and then I say, we cannot afford to wait any longer, because World War III is an invisible war, until it is made visible, and that is coming very soon. Today, September 15th, is the first message of absolute honesty, not brutal, because no longer do we need to assault ourselves or others in order for the truth to be felt. You feel truth. It is resonant. It is about vibration. Everything is energy, including emotion, energy in motion, as well as veil, the evil that is veiled and made to seem pretty, nice, delectable, delicious. Just like Hansel and Gretel, who were lured by the witch to get nice and plump so she had more to cook. Thank you to my ex. All of them. Not just the one that taught me the most. All of you have, whether official or not. And so I say thank you for making me who I am and teaching me who I am not. I appreciate you. I honor you. And I release you as I release myself to do what I am here for. And I hope that you will do the same. Whether you are one I've just addressed as one I've shared history with or not, you too can do this very thing of releasing yourself and those who may have hurt you. because the souls that love us the very most oftentimes are the ones who have contracted to betray us in order for us to grow and become the one that we were waiting for. There is no Savior coming. We are it. Jesus Christ, Buddha, all of those enlightened masters who ascended and embodied more light than shadow and no longer required the physical vessel in order for them to be here, all of them came before us in order to plant those cells of recognition within the mechanical system of the body for us to reactivate and remember, to become a member with again. Thank you to all of you who have hurt me previously or will try in future. And may I be a mirror to you too, for us all to see through the lies of the oblivious that is made obvious when we finally take off the veils of evil that kept us from seeing the truth of our divine nature. I hope this message serves you. I would love to know what it means to you, what it means for you, and what you're going to do with it, because that is the only thing that makes any of this mean anything. What will you do with it? What does it mean to you? What does it mean for you? How does it fit? How does it sit within the world as you currently know it? And then how can it help us in grounding and creating the world that we are bringing into fruition together? Thank you for your time. It means a lot because at the end of the day, it's all we have. I send you love, compassion, and hope that this message inspires you to remember the greatness that is inside of you too. Have a great day. Laura J. Namaste. Light in me honors. The light in you. Thank you.